Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, an almanac of garden history, literature, and small botanical joys. I'm Jennifer Ebling, and today is February 5th. Some lives move quickly through the world. Others move carefully through it. They walk, they notice, and they return with their pockets full of things most people pass by. Today's stories belong to people who learned the garden, not by standing back, but by stepping in, sometimes farther than was wise, sometimes longer than was comfortable, and often without knowing whether anyone would ever notice. Here's today's garden history. It was on this day in 1815 that John Carne Bidwill was born in Exeter, England. John was restless early. By 17, he was crossing oceans. By his 20s, he was already moving away from settled places, drawn inland toward landscapes not yet botanically explored. In February of 1839, John arrived at the Bay of Islands in New Zealand. He took in the harbors and the towns and decided almost immediately they were not enough. He wanted the interior. So he arranged passage on small vessels, gathered Maori guides and bearers, and set off through river valleys, forested hills, and volcanic terrain that shifted beneath his feet. John kept careful notes. He watched how vegetation changed with elevation and exposure. He collected plants, especially alpine species, things few Europeans had seen, let alone gathered. At Rotorua, he met the Reverend Thomas Chapman, who had just arrived from Taupo, the first European known to do so. It was a fortunate meeting. Chapman helped him press on, and they crossed Lake Taupo together by canoe. They climbed toward the mountains, and eventually John faced the steep volcanic cone of Tongariro. He wrote that the climb was exhausting, that without the idea of standing where no European had stood before, he would have turned back. From high on the slopes, John was rewarded. He saw the blue lake on Tongariro, a detail visible only from above. John returned with plants. He sent specimens to London, to John Lindley, and to William Hooker at Kew. Many waited years to be named. Some were credited to others. John complained briefly, but then he kept working. He brought seeds and seedlings of the bunya pine to England, a tree that would later bear his name, Carne Bidwillii. He returned to Australia and was briefly appointed director of the Sydney Botanic Gardens. But John was not bureaucratic, and while the governor expressed regret, John expressed none. Instead, he asked for work that would take him back outdoors. He became commissioner of the Crown Lands at Wide Bay and wrote that he was being paid well for doing what was only a pleasure. Sadly, that happiness did not last. In 1853, while surveying a road between Wide Bay and Moreton Bay, John became separated from his party. He was lost in the bush for 8 days, cutting through scrub with a pocket hook. He made it home, but his body never recovered. John Bidwill died on March 16, 1853, at just 38 years old. What remains are the plants, the bunya alpine species that carry his name, records still cited at Kew. And it was on this day, in 1826, that Samuel Alexander Stewart was born in Philadelphia. Samuel's formal schooling ended early. His mother died young, and by 11, Samuel was working, first as an errand boy, later alongside his father in a distillery, and eventually in the family's trunk-making shop in Belfast. Books and learning came at night. What Samuel had early on was a love of walking. His sister once tossed his cap out of the window so he could slip away for long walks, with their father none the wiser. Despite that love of the outdoors, Samuel didn't formally discover botany until midlife. But when he did, he pursued it with gusto. Saturday field trips with the science lecturer Ralph Tate. Systematic observation, careful naming, precise locality notes. Samuel helped found the Belfast Naturalists Field Club, and over time, something else happened. People began sending him specimens. They asked him to verify records. They trusted his observations without question. Samuel insisted that the location of a plant mattered more than its name, because names could be corrected later, but places, if not recorded, were lost forever. His greatest honor came when he was elected to the Linnean Society. It meant everything to him. In 1910, after a lifetime of walking hills and moors, Samuel was crossing a street in Belfast. He slipped trying to avoid a passing dray and died a few hours later. Thankfully, his work remains, a flora still respected for its accuracy, with records of place that still hold. In today's Unearthed Words, we hear an excerpt from The Gardener's Bed Book by Richardson Wright for this day, February 5th, published in 1929. Richardson wrote, "We used to think that one was initiated into gardening by reading seed catalogs. That belief was based merely on a profound ignorance. The last and final rite, the trine baptism, the greatest of all prolegomenon, is to get poison ivy. Some people are immune to this monstrous weed, and they laugh their weaker brothers to scorn. Country boys, they say, can even chew the leaves with impunity, but the rest of us must pass through the fire. Doctors seem to disagree on cures for it. Some suggest washing with green soap and then bathing the welts with freshly made spirits of niter. Others paint the welts with iodine. Still others use ordinary photographer's hypo solution. As a precaution, whenever we have been handling the pestiferous stuff, we run indoors and scrub our hands and face vigorously with very hot, common kitchen sink soap suds." Richardson's book reads like a gardener's diary, a time capsule from nearly a century ago. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Forbidden Garden by Emily Herrick. This week is Novels Week on the Daily Gardener. It's a celebration of garden-rooted fiction, best read by the fire. At the center of The Forbidden Garden is a walled garden on an English estate, long neglected, long resisted. Generations have tried to restore it and failed. Sorrel Sparrow arrives not as a decorator, but as a gardener who listens. She reads soil and structure. She senses history, heartbreak, betrayal, ambition, all woven into hedges and stone. This is a story for gardeners who know that some places don't simply want to be fixed. They want to be understood. And finally, here's something sweet to ignite the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day in 1868 that Charles Frederick Langdon was born in Somerset, England. He grew up on an estate, the son of a woodsman, surrounded by trees and long views. He trained as a gardener, and with encouragement and funding of his employer, began breeding plants seriously. Not far away, another life was unfolding. James Beryl Blackmore, trained as an engineer, built a greenhouse at the bottom of his garden in Bath and filled it with begonias. The two men first met at the Bath Flower Show. Both exhibited, both won prizes. and mutual admiration did the rest. Their friendship became a true partnership when James bought land to start a nursery, Blackmore and Langdon, a name that came to stand for quality. As the business grew, their families melded, with marriages uniting their households. In the early days, plants traveled by horse and rail. Staff slept in empty vans once the plants were unloaded. During the war, land girls took over the work. Greenhouses were damaged. A field of peonies was lost to bombing. But the begonias survived, and so did the delphiniums, their signature flowers. 4 generations later, the nursery still sends plants around the world, living things carrying a century of care. Today's stories remind us that some lives are shaped and made extraordinary by deep attention to the natural world. And as gardeners, we are all the better for it. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.